And here's one of the things that comes to mind is, organized, like you said, organized religion is not necessarily bad. Like, this is not an organized religion bashing session. This is
Not at all.
simply, acknowledging the facts and looking at where we are. And I think, like what you said, a lot of it has to do with the ego and the bureaucratic aspect of the organized religion.
Yeah.
The way I see it, organized religion provides a foundation or a base level at which to operate at. I was having this discussion with one of the members of our synagogue, and we were talking about prayer because he and I laugh about the fact that most 95% of the people at the synagogue, they're saying the words, but what are they really saying? And I have to admit, I'm not always a great example myself. But I asked him, I said, so then what is the point? Why do we show up and to these, organized times? And why do we do prayer in this organized way? And he said, because it's a base level. It's you have to say the prayers. You have to do what organized religion does. But the thing that most people don't remember, the next step is question it, understand it, try to figure it out. I shared with Yermi this week. I'm on an educators WhatsApp group for various educators within Jewish education. And one of them posted how he was uncomfortable with something that happened. And they basically, I don't want to go into details, but essentially he was uncomfortable with something and he brought it to everybody's attention asking, what are your thoughts about this topic? And there are people who are totally in agreement with him that no, this thing should never be done. And then there are people like myself who are like, the reason you're uncomfortable is because you haven't questioned why this is our standard operating procedure. Why is our standard operating procedure that we don't do X, Y, and Z? You have to understand it. Now, in a way, I'm in agreement with him, but in a way, I'm also not in agreement with him because, again, there's that level of here's organized religion, here is how we operate, but now let's understand why we operate that way. Once we've built in the habits of operating, let's understand the operating system. Let's get down to the core of why we're doing it, and then that's how we make spirituality. That's how we discover the spirituality, and that's how we make it ours, because it is personal. So you can be religious and not spiritual, but I think it's very hard to be spiritual and not quote unquote religious, because it's they go hand in hand, and the spirituality gives to that. Not that you have to be both. Figuring out how to become spiritual is that it's a personal journey. It's questioning and looking inside. So I have so much more to say, but I'm going to turn it back to you guys because.
But yeah, Scott, yeah.
I'm dying to say something, actually, and thank you, Jeremy, for giving me the chance to say it, because there is something.
Because I'm hearing this whole how to become spiritual thing, so I want you to go into that. Like,
yeah,
I feel that's your direction.
Well, I definitely will try and lead this statement into that. One of the things that I love that you're saying is the idea that everything needs to be questioned for that spirituality to have any meaning. And so to me, when you talk about how to become spiritual, one of the foundational requirements of becoming spiritual is building an understanding of spirituality that has the intellectual force to satisfy questioning.
Right.
So here's an example, and what I will say is, look, I'm not going to pull any punches. I think the one thing I want to be respectful of is language here. So if there is a word that I use that is offensive to some people, let me know. It's the best way I know how to describe it. In the Christian Old Testament, the book of Judges 2:19 has a passage involving a battle between the Israelites and some non-Israelites. I don't remember which non-Israelite group it was. But in any event, it explicitly says in that paragraph, at least it's translated into English, that God could not defeat this other battle or this other enemy because the enemy had iron chariots. And there is an implication in that, at least from a Christian perspective, that God was not all-powerful. If God couldn't defeat another army because that army had iron chariots, well, what on earth would make us think that God could defeat a human being right now that has a car? And so when I read that passage, one of the things I did when I was younger is I read the Bible all the way through. in some cases multiple times, because I wanted to be clear about what I was believing, what I was going to church and seeing. And this passage stuck out. That's a dramatic statement. And I went and I talked to some pastors about it. And rather than giving me a clear answer as to what that might have meant, I got a lot of, well, you've just got to have faith, or you've got to just accept that it is true no matter what, all that sort of stuff. That did not carry intellectual water. There could have been any number of different answers that a naturally curious child could have been given that may have fulfilled them. But when that sort of lack of basic intellectual qualification occurs when questioning the religious tradition one has grown up in, then the whole stack of cards begins to fall. And so to the extent that one is going to become spiritual, for whatever reason, I do believe that engaging the intellect is a fundamental requirement. My parents were horrible about this. I would argue this, that, and the other and say, well, what about this? It's particularly around moral or ethical issues. And the response I'd get would be, honor thy father and thy mother. That's what it says in the 10 Commandments. Didn't cut it. Didn't cut it. And so I do feel like how to become spiritual involves intellectual engagement. However, intellectualism, empirical thinking, without bothering to acknowledge what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is the limitation of human intellect, is to me the hallmark of a fool. If there is anything I've learned along the way, the sheer consistency of transcendental experiences across faiths, across times, and across all sorts of sets of circumstances puts me in a position where my own intellect cannot accept that it's all just made up. Right. That everyone is just inventing this sort of spiritual experience or inventing over and over. And I've read the God Gene. I'm aware about all of the different potential genetic or biological bases for religion that people claim exist. That being said, even that to me is an answer that doesn't carry water. Anything that discounts the lived experience of the overwhelming majority of human beings in existence or trivializes it to that extent is a step away from spirituality. I do feel a soulless life, a life without spirituality, which is one that I lived, is a life not worth living.